I'm Doug Thompson of BDS. Welcome to Stories That Matter. My special guest this afternoon, Randall Murphree from the AFA, American Family Association. Randall, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Doug. It's great to be here.
Well, I appreciate the fact you guys are in Elvis's hometown, aren't you?
We are Tupelo, Mississippi.
Were you there before Elvis got there or after?
No, he was already gone by the time I moved to Tupelo.
Was he?
So,
Yeah. Well, we visited Tupelo one time when we were racing down at Daytona. We stopped by and went through it. His little house down there. The museum wasn't built yet, but I would have liked to have. I would have liked to have met him personally. Never got to, but you've certainly enjoyed his music. Still do.
sure.
Well, Randall, tell me a little about American Family Association.
Well, Doug, Don Wildman, our founder, was a local pastor who just felt a calling of the Lord to try to do something about television programming. Initially, when he founded this group in 1977, his sole issue was television programming. That's because he had 4 young children at the time, and they just were not finding good, decent, wholesome shows to watch on TV, even that far back, more than 40 years ago. So he thought somebody needs to do something, and he stepped out and just left, felt called to leave the pulpit ministry behind and to come alongside other like-minded people and try to have an impact on what was on television. It didn't take him too long to begin to expand. The second major issue that he targeted was pornography and its ready availability in the family marketplace. So back in the early 80s, that would have been the VHS videotapes that you could rent at the local drugstore. So he took that on and just gradually through the years we've broadened to include any social or moral issue that has an impact on the family.
Well, Randall, when did you come on board?
I came on board in 1983, so that was about 7 years after he began the ministry. I was staff member number 7. Now we have about 120 folks on staff. So.
That's awesome. And what were your duties when you came as number 7?
Well, I came to be editor of the newsletter that he was doing at that time, and it was a pretty, dare I say, a primitive production. It was something that he was doing on a hand kind of copier in his office. Of course, it was the only way to communicate with people then. There was no email, so there was no internet. So I came as editor. I like to tell my friends that I've been at this job for 37 years without a promotion yet. So I'm going to stay till they promote me to something, you know.
Yeah, better be careful there, hadn't you, Randall? Promote you to something else and say, okay, do the same thing, the magic that you did with the AFA Journal, why do it again? Well, Randall, what was your background when you came in?
My background was in public schools. I had worked as a high school English and journalism teacher, some junior college English courses, and then I had worked in school administration with rural county, my home county back in North Alabama. So I had the background in teaching English and writing. I always loved writing, and that was what I brought to the AFA Journal.
When you first started in '83, was it a full-time job, or were you keeping the teaching job and then doing that on the side?
It was full-time. I moved from Alabama to Tupelo to work full-time with Don Wildman.
And I'm looking at the AFA Journal right now, and of course I get it. And as soon as I get it, I go to the articles and I start reading them and the book summaries because they're absolutely amazing. Every one of the articles are amazing. I don't know how did you pick the staff that came on board over the years, because they're excellent.
That's been partly a group effort. I mean, my bosses, our administration here, but Don Wildman always seemed to be able to pick people. He just could recognize character and integrity. If he knew somebody well enough to offer them a job, he did that sometimes not even knowing what what the job was going to be. In my case, it was pretty well spelled out for me initially, but we've had, in some cases, we've had some freelance writers occasionally, and one was a local high school English teacher. And after she wrote 2 or 3 articles for us, we just said, hey, we need to get her in here full time. And she's here now. One of our writers now was working in our American Family Radio department, just doing radio spots and a lot of the kind of stuff that a creative person can do, but she was a writer. She wanted to do deeper things, and she volunteered to do a feature story for us. And I said, okay, we'll let you try. She's full-time on my staff now. One of our latest hires is a bivocational pastor who just didn't think he could write until his wife, who is a writer, just backed him in a corner and said, okay, you're going to write this article. It's one of the best things we've ever published in AFA Journal. So
Wow.
He's working with us full time now. So
Wow, that's tremendous.
The Lord works that out. I mean, he brings the right people to us.
He has a way of doing that, doesn't he, Randall?
Absolutely.
What's the first article you wrote? Do you remember it?
Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, I don't remember. It
That's
probably,
good.
it would have been something, an in-depth kind of review of television programs, because as I said, that's the only thing we were focusing on at that time.
Mm.
So we reprinted a lot of columns from conservative columnists on the general things going on in the culture, but our own writing was pretty much television.
All right, and so Don retired from the day-to-day operation. He's still, of course, founder, and his son Tim took over?
That's right. Don kind of gradually phased out. He didn't just set a date and say, okay, this is it. But he continued to work in the office part-time, and then we would realize that, hey, we're not seeing him as often. So he was, we rarely see him now. He doesn't come by the office often.
I've seen Tim's son in some of the pictures in the magazine. Is he working full time for the AFA?
Yes. In fact, 3 of Tim Wildman's children are full-time on staff in different positions. And again, it's amazing how the Lord prepared each one of them for precisely what they're doing now. Wesley, Walker is probably the son that you've seen on the commentary page. He sometimes writes a column where Tim's column usually appears.
Well, Randall, when you go through and you start looking for the next journal, and is this a quarterly?
It's a monthly.
Monthly.
We do 11 copies a year, 11 issues a year.
Okay. So when you do these, how do you go about determining what stories you want to write about? How do you go about that?
Well, we keep a long list, a running list of story ideas on the issues that we would cover today. Anything from marriage and family and parenting, which are big things for us. Other ministries that we can highlight and bring a little attention to them, we like to do that. Freedom of religion in our culture today and the assault that we're under there. Media bias, trafficking issues. So we try to have pro-life issues. That's another big one for us. We try to have a balance in each issue of the journal. So the things that come up as big issues, our radio arm can cover them, just immediately, day by day. That's a little more challenge sometimes. The world moves so fast. It's a challenge sometimes in print because we're right now writing our copy for our September issue. So we sometimes have to figure out how to balance covering an issue because the details may have changed when it comes out in 6 weeks. But I try to give the writers a lot of input into the stories that they want to write about. I don't want to. We don't want to put them on a certain beat. I like to keep them involved and aware of other things in their main issues. We've got one of the guys who loves history uh, and the military, so he winds up doing some of those articles. We also put him on something else sometimes, maybe a pro-life feature, or I try to keep them balanced.
When you go to doing a monthly publication such as you're doing, tell me what that looks like as the month rolls around. Do you already have the next 2-3 months planned out? I know that you're working on September now, but there's some stories that are just literally happening so fast. How do you do that? How do you handle that?
I wish I knew. Sometimes, again, the Lord just steps in, and we work. As I said, we have begun already writing for the September issue. The one that you have in your hand is July, I believe, that folks, our subscribers would have received at home recently. Then the August issue is at the printer, and will be going into homes in mid-July. So we're working on September. We don't try to reach much farther than that. We're almost able to just do one issue at a time. They do kind of overlap sometimes, but that gets pretty confusing for me, even as long as I've been here. So we'll sit down at the table together and kind of brainstorm about the major features that we want to try to cover, and look at that balance again, different issues that are going on in our culture.
Does it get a little scary every now and then, Randall, when you say, I'm not feeling it, I'm not getting it right here, and the deadline starts getting a little closer and a little closer? You have some of those days?
It gets scary at some point almost every day. But again, I've said earlier, the Lord steps in sometimes, and we sometimes don't even realize what he's doing until we're proofreading the copy. Our typesetter, our designer lays it all out. Everybody on staff reads everybody's work and proofreads. And we discover that the same scripture has shown up in 2 or 3 different articles where the writers were not working together on a theme, but the Lord was. Or in this, the one we just sent to the printer, one of the writers came up with a headline that was precisely the business motto of the business owner that I was writing about. So we're startled sometimes at how the finished product, we think, people are going to think we planned this, and we didn't sometimes.
But the Lord planned it.
He did.
Yeah, he knew. He knew in his scout. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, because you can do an article. Well, it's like the one I was looking at in your July coming up on Charles Billingsley. What an amazing story. What an absolutely amazing story.
Yeah, we have, in that issue, there are several articles related to the COVID-19 situation. Some shorter things about some of the troublesome things about religious discrimination really happened earlier in the season. There was a Kansas City church, a Kansas City mayor or city council asked people who were going, if a church opened for any kind of service, they were to submit the names, addresses, and phone numbers of people who were coming to church. In Greenville, Mississippi, we had a mayor who levied fines against people who parked their cars in the parking lot of the church on a Sunday morning. The people who were there in their cars didn't get out of their cars. They were listening on speakers, and they were fined $500.
Oh, my goodness.
He rescinded that. But, that's what the church is facing in our culture these days. There are people who hate anything that has to do with biblical Christianity.
Yeah, there are. I agree with you completely. I'm the president of our church and have been for many, many years. And these are difficult times, very difficult times. And Randall, I I've noticed a number of things about the article. You also, about your journal, you also do the book reviews. And you assign those out to different writers, and they read, study, review it, and then give a review.
That's kind of an informal approach. We have an informal approach to that as well. We receive probably 10 or 12 books a week unsolicited from people who are hoping that we will review their books or pass them along, and they might get a little time on our radio network. But we get a lot more books than we're able to cover. But when we see books advertised or when publicists send us a press release, we have opportunity to request review copies. And then we'll kind of put them on the table, and different staff writers will say, oh, I'd like to do this one, or I'll sometimes ask, will you please do this one? I want us to do it. And somebody's got to, so it's your turn. So.
Yeah. Well, Randall, you mentioned one other thing about the AFA, of course, is the radio network. It's national, isn't it?
We have AFA owns about 180 radio stations scattered across the country, more densely across the southeast, and then kind of spanning out from there. As far as the few stations on the West Coast, some 2 or 3 in New England area, but they are AFA owned. And we have it's a 24/7 network. So.
Yeah, we had J.J. Jasper years ago. He was a host on it, still is, but he came out, stayed at the house with us. We had a revival here at a local football field, and J.J. just did an absolutely fantastic job. And it's so nice to see, of course, that he's still there, and see how accomplished that the radio network is. It's just tremendous. What a difference AFA is making across this small planet.
We hope so.
You're doing an awesome job. Randall, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule this afternoon to visit with us, and I appreciate it. And as soon as I get a chance, I'm going to finish reading the July edition, and I'm going to look forward to August and so forth. And it's just absolutely amazing. Thank you, Randall, for what you do.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. You take care. God bless you.
You too.
Bye.